Hey, everybody, David Bloom here with FCMT Talks, here with our friends from Media Play News, talking about the future of streaming in 3 years. ABC throws down the gauntlet at the FCC. There are some conversations going on in Pennsylvania and Texas about data centers being bad. Who knew? And is Netflix striking out with its very selective baseball coverage? Welcome, everybody. I'm David Bloom, co-founder of NextTMT, the newsletter, and this here podcast, NextTMT Talks, here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel. So, Daniel.
Yes, sir.
CNBC did a fine job, got together a bunch of people like Chris Winfrey and Angeli Sood, and people that actually from across the business of streaming video, both on the free side and the other stuff, because CNBC is actually kind of really coming into itself, I think, now that Versant's out there in the wilderness on its own. I think it's interesting what they're doing. But this was very good stuff. I think Alex Sherman, who does a lot of their sports coverage, sports business coverage, oversaw a lot of this. And interesting stuff about where streaming is going in 3 years. I recommend people check that out. But turns out we have been covering streaming for a long time, too, and actually sort of know what we're talking about. And that has never stopped us in the past
Jimmy
anyway.
Pitaro and Angeli Sood and John Landgraf and Jeff Zucker and Charlie Collier and Rashida Jones. It's us that know.
Also, it's us also. It's say, because they put their time into, and they're pretty good at what they do.
Yeah, okay.
So,
it's backups.
It's backups. Well, yeah, if you can't get us somehow, I don't know how that could happen. I was reading a New Yorker piece, or maybe it was the Atlantic piece about Alan Dershowitz being exiled from his, people on Martha's Vineyard who won't talk to him, led by Larry David, of course.
Pushed to
me, that is not a bug. That is a feature of life. Larry David doesn't want to talk to you anymore, but that's just me. I know you have a much stronger affiliation and affection for David's
Larry David
output.
Did a bit on him. They interviewed him, and he said, unlike my show, I don't actually have a lot of confrontations and conflict in my real life. Right. If I do, it's usually with somebody who I feel like I could take in a fight.
Yeah, right.
That's all Dershowitz, which I thought was...
That's 88-year-old Alan Dershowitz. This is a 69-year-old skinny, balding dude saying that. But it's like, okay, I'm glad you can take out the guy who's 17 years older. That's impressive.
Listen, if you want to put that on the White House lawn, I'll pay for a...
Yeah, right. Now that is an Ultimate Fighting Championship match I can get behind, and I don't care what it does to the grass, not that our only president cares, but I'm just saying. Anyway, so the future of streaming, I think, more generally, is pretty fascinating. We're in the middle of a moment where Paramount is on full charm offensive, sort of, for spending $111, probably $112 billion to buy a Warner Brothers Discovery. So that's one big part of what will occupy the world of streaming going forward, how you merge together Paramount Plus and BET Plus, which is actually a very good little niche streaming service, with HBO and Discovery Plus, which is whoever watches that because they love reality shows so much. It's something, but all that's going to get mashed together. That's one component of the future of streaming, but there are many other things going on. And I'm just sort of curious, where do you see the business in 3 years?
It's interesting that you mentioned the merger, because we had on this channel just a couple of nights ago, we had Rick Ellis, the all your screens, too much TV impresario, real sharp guy. And we talked about how important it was, those linear cable channels. You can dismiss them, say, oh, CNBC's hemorrhaging ratings, but there's still a lot of value to be wrung out of them, and paying off all the debt that David Ellison's going to incur. You need those channels to perform and
not go away too fast. The whole point is, how long will it keep chucking out money to finance your very expensive acquisition at incredibly high debt levels before you can skinny down everything, including those golden geese, that flock that you're going to be harvesting,
right,
before you get to a place that's sustainable.
You've been saying this for a while, and Rick agreed with you that this idea
he's a smart guy,
a flagship cable asset, the big linchpin to that strategy is kind of ludicrous. So that was interesting to hear, given the preponderance of assumptions. I was one of them. And of course, you get rid of that and things done. It doesn't work that way.
Right. No. That's going to be a very, if they pull this off, they're going to have to thread a needle pretty carefully between extracting more money from the cable providers as they're consolidating in carriage fees and advertising revenue at a time when the advertisers are leaving cable in particular for the much more targeted opportunities within streaming. We're seeing, I think, an acceleration of that shift. So as the money comes out of cable, traditional cable. Broadcast is going to be what it's going to be, but it's I think important to think of broadcast as really broadcast plus cable because a big chunk of their money comes from being carried, must carry rules that
Yeah.
require the cable providers to have them and pay them a carriage fee for the privilege. So they're a little different than the networks that don't have a broadcast component. But
Here, I wanted to answer your question, and I kind of took a
good.
long way, as I'm prone to doing that. But here you have a major part of a huge prospectus is hitched on the notion that as dilapidated as we all think these networks are now, both on the broadcast and cable sides, linear has the steady downward progression that somewhere in the early 2030s bottoms out, and you'll be able to reap billions of dollars worth of subscription and advertising money until that happens. And I wonder, the Nielsen published their last gauge under their current methodology today for June. I think streaming was 49% of consumption, 48.5%. So nearly half of all consumption from people 2 and older in the US is now streaming. And you have a Nielsen partner, the folks that put together the ARF study.
Advertising Research Foundation.
Right, that's them.
Yeah, it just sounds like the Canine Corps has been enlisted to track viewership, but it's actually the Advertising Research Foundation, which does advertising research.
It's always been like people who stream generally have linear too. A full third of American homes, according to the Advertising Research Foundation, just stream. They don't do any broadcast or cable at all. I kind of feel like the projections may be a little bit too conservative, like the cliff sides of Palos Verdes that are behind you, David. I kind of think that it could collapse, the linear ecosystem could collapse a little bit at a time and then all at once, a lot faster than people anticipate sometime in the next.
It happens slowly, then all at once. Who was that? That was a great line by an author whose name escapes me at this moment. But yes,
that was
I think you're right.
Gatsby guy. Was that Great Gatsby? I don't know.
I think you might be a Gatsby line. Yes, that it's certainly been repurposed many times since then. It's 1927.
The English major. I'm just the guy who, works in the coal mine trying to pay for the tuition. So,
yes, yeah. Ask the kid at Berkeley. He's like, hey, yeah,
he would know that.
But it is an interesting point, and I think that we've already seen as we mentioned in I think the last show, or maybe in talking with Rick Ellis, Warner Brothers last earnings call 10 days ago, revenues from its cable operations down 9% on the quarter year over year. No, I'm sorry, 11%, and they were expected by analysts to be down 2%. So that's a big delta of 9 percentage points in the wrong direction. And some of that is a bit seasonal, but some of that is like, ooh, is this going to come back? Because that is not what you want to see. 9% gets you to small very fast.
Right.
They didn't have Q2. They did not have the NBA like they had the previous year. They didn't have the expenses of the NBA licenses, TV rights that they had the year before. But there was a lot of money being made in those NBA rights. So it's going to be, that's how it's going to be, right? Yeah, and so the question is, how fast and they're a special case, but what about everybody else?
I think analysts were surprised about the last NBA negotiation, how streaming heavy it was. And they could be surprised at the NFL renegotiations that are, depending on who you believe, coming up soon or not. I guess Fox it says they're going to not do it on the NFL's timeline.
Hate for something to happen to your little broadcast operation there, Roop.
Yeah. But, so that's my kind of
but before we go, because this is important, we're talking about the next 3 years. Does Fox
Right.
still have an NFL deal in 3 years when they're supposed to be doing that look-in 2029, right? The look-in is a contract that runs through 2033, I believe. And the NFL smartly said, we're going to put in a look-in because we don't know what the future of streaming looks like, the future of TV looks like all the way out to 2033. So they said, we're going to take a little mid-cycle break in this 11-year deal and reevaluate where we want to put things. I think that was very smart of them. But then they got the opportunity to reopen things with the CBS deal, the Paramount acquisition by Skydance, change of ownership. Hey, we can look at them. And while we're at it, let's look at everybody else, which made a lot
Yeah.
of sense from their standpoint because they looked at the NBA deal and said, holy crap, those guys get
Right.
$75 billion out of these jokers. What can we get? What money did we leave on the table as the most important programming in television?
So to kind of, so we've pivoted here, but I think it's an interesting pivot. The
Thank God.
NFL has this, this look in and can renegotiate their TV deals, which expire after the 34 season. And Rupert Murdoch, I guess, had dinner with the president. And then all of a sudden, the NFL's antitrust exemption is getting looked at. They're concerned about that renegotiation. Lachlan Murdoch recently said, no, we're not going to renegotiate this year. We're going to do that in 2030 when the look-in actually happens. That's when it's actually scheduled. It's not this year. It's 3-4 years from now.
It'll be interesting to see how disciplined they are about that if we get to 2029, 2030.
Well, here's my question to
and
you.
Trump's not in office. Brendan Carr may no longer be at the FCC. It may be a whole different regime. So
We can have tanks running down our streets by that time. I don't know. It's hard to tell the future. But
thanks for the memories.
But if you're strong-armed into that position, if you're Roger Goodell and you want to talk now, and Lachlan Murdoch says, no, look at your contract, it's 2030, what's to stop you from talking to Comcast, NBCU, or just NBCU now, I guess, ABC, Disney, ESPN, your other partners, and saying, look, we don't love what's happening with Fox. We're going to get out of that deal in 2030. How would you like their rights?
Yeah, right. We can cut that pie now, and you guys can prepare for all of this, and it'll take out all those objections about, oh, it's going to hurt broadcast. Like, no, it'll just be one less broadcast outlet that hasn't. And what does Fox, which is obviously pivoting hard, we're right at the 1-year anniversary of Fox's Fox One launch. I think it was the 18th of last year, and we're right at that 1-year anniversary. And I think it's interesting to think about between the Roku deal, which pushes them hard into knowing data and knowing their customers more, and Fox One, which was priced not to cannibalize their existing broadcast and cable operations. It's priced pretty expensive. I think it's $30 a month or something like that. Fox is going to be less broadcast oriented too, 3 years from now.
So
will it have the NFL, do you think?
Let me cauterize this and circle back and ask you the question just in a second. So whatever's happening, I have to bow down at this point. The Murdochs don't make a lot of mistakes. Guaranteed they have a strategy that usually works. So far be it for me to second guess them about anything.
Well, I would second guess them about News of the World and hacking into royal family cell phones and those of other journalists and prominent people for the purpose of stories, including those of grieving widows dealing with just killed people. So that might have been a misstep. Just saying.
So I'm sure there are other missteps we just don't know about. Question for you, because you asked the question for me. What changes in television, fundamental as they may be, do you foresee?
Well, I think we'll probably not have AMC stars. Some of those smaller niche operations will have been absorbed by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Lionsgate has been trying to sell itself. Discovery Stream, as Laura Martin keeps writing, is now just harvesting data payments for licensing its 30,000 nature documentaries to AI tools. And I think that'll be a significant stream for everybody. I do think that there's going to be a lot more, a lot more content that is high dollar, high production value. There will still be that. But the question will be, where does that run? How much of that is getting made? And that is essential to the future of what we call Hollywood in terms of the people who work and live in that community and its neighboring 30-mile zone, the TMZ. And I think that there will be a lot less of that. I think there will be a lot more low cost. And, part of the problem for the broadcast and cable guys is they have pivoted hard to a lot of easily inexpensive, derivative, or taken from their streaming and repurposed content. And the more they do that, the less they're distinctive. Law and Order, you could practically use an AI to generate those scripts. Like, oh, let's look at the crimes of the week. Boom, here's the script for the latest Law and Order. And no knock on those people; they've been making a very good living for a very long time. But they have a formula, and at this point, even AI could figure out how to do a serviceable first run on that. So it becomes the vertical dramas that we've talked about, or vertical programming. Reality verticals is going to be big. I think that's going to really be nice for Peacock with its Bravo connection. I think that's going to be a big deal, actually, much more so than romantasy, or maybe horror also works there as a genre in the verticals. But it'll be smaller stuff that much lower budgets, much lower production values, and there will still be some stuff. But when you're taking your swings, it's going to be really interesting, because you look at what happens in the game business and you look at where that stuff goes. It's really tough. And so who has live events? Well, NBC Universal does with its parks. Disney does with its parks and resorts. Netflix is trying to get there. Warner Brothers has some, like a Harry Potter world at Universal. Does David Ellison say, hey, we need to get into live events because this other stuff it's a bad business, and live events are going to matter for people. Experiences are going to matter, not just coming out of the pandemic, but just generally.
Yeah.
He is not going to be able to do 30 films a year. He may say he's going to do 30 films a year for 3 years, and that bought some support for the deal. That's exactly how many the two separate studios were going to do anyway, which is sort of goofy. But, he's going to do 30 a year. So, well, that's a pretty prodigious undertaking. I don't think that sustains. But we're seeing very high-end movies and very low-end movies do very well. And the stuff in between has been completely hollowed out, right? I'm heading off to the Venice Film Festival in a couple of weeks. There are going to be some really cool kind of in-between movies, Werner Herzog, and
we're talking about TV, though.
Yeah. But that stuff comes out, and then where does it go? It goes to streaming.
Right.
And it goes down those ladders of distribution to what's left. Mm-hmm. And I just think cable and to some also substantial extent, broadcast will have less and less distinctive content fast as their values drop. They're down to 55 million homes plus whatever YouTube TV and Hulu plus Live TV have. They're down to like 55 million homes, and that's half of America.
It was weird. Along the line of events, I watched Ted Lasso with Vivian last night, and they mentioned Susan Boyle.
Yeah, right. That's a name. That was a blast from the past, huh? Well, it was like some callback that he made, right?
Britain's Got Talent. Pierce Morgan was there. Simon Cowell was there, and she was that middle-aged woman who sang in a church, who with her just a revelation of talent.
Yeah,
it was a cultural moment that sort of. That was true water cooler, and it wasn't that long ago. It was, I guess,
10 years ago. Yeah. No, maybe it was too big. It's been a while. Yeah.
And you had Harry Styles, which is kind of the same thing. These were not terribly recent, but they weren't that long ago. Like a event television that felt live, that sort of captured just different demographics from all over the world. Mm-hmm. I think that's what Netflix sees when we talk about live events. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you notice, though, they're being they licensed the World Baseball Classic rights, but only in Japan. because Japan had a great team, and Japan is kind of baseball nuts with Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto and some of the other Japanese players with significant quality that are playing in the U.S. now, plus their own very vibrant stuff. And they knew the World Baseball Classic would be good in Japan. And it was, even
I will,
after Japan went out. But it was very specific, though. And so, and look at the franchises that Netflix has had out of Korea: Squid
right.
Games, K-pop Demon Hunters. Right? Those are gigantic. Two of the three or four biggest things in Netflix came out of this little country of 40 million people. This hothouse content factory called South Korea. So, but they're plucking this stuff from all over, and who else is doing that well?
You
And
won't
that's going to
see,
be really important.
you won't see Sarandos and Peters say, we're doing X number of this next year.
Mm-mm.
Because I rightly understand that it's a global world, and hard and fast, you respond to opportunities that are
Right.
practical, make sense. You don't set hard and fast rules on formats, and you mine Korea, and you don't commit to a payload delivered globally. Whatever makes sense that year, whatever is good. You
That
license
being
baseball,
said,
you
that
like
being said, they are going to be giving a gigantic release to Greta Gerwig's Narnia, and that will be an event. The woman who did Barbie will do her take on Narnia, C.S. Lewis's classic Christian allegory, children's stories,
right.
and that will be huge. And they will give that a significant
That's not to say they
IMAX
take big
run.
swings. Everybody who's big takes, you have to, but
But it's theatrical. They're going to do a big swing in theaters first and roll that out. But the thing is, they're going to pick their spots, and everybody else needs to pick their spots. Like, it's going to be really interesting to see what Disney does, opening its Avengers movie the same day as Doom 3. Which one is going to do better? Some people are like, I don't care about the Avengers. They've sort of run out of it. It's going to have X-Men. It's going to have Fantastic Four. It's going to have the Avengers. It's going to have Doctor Doom. As Robert Downey is Doctor Doom, Doctor Downey,
so
but
circling back to what we were talking about, I'm going to segue us to, since we were talking about Netflix and you did mention baseball, this
yeah,
Field of Dreams thing.
I was teeing this up. There's a baseball joke for you. Ha!
You were okay. Go
T-ball.
ahead, because you told me earlier it didn't do as well as hoped. What happened?
Well, they got about 1.4 million, at least the early ratings I saw, which isn't bad. But the Field of Dreams game was supposed to be this special thing, and what's really interesting to me is baseball.
1.4 million views.
Yeah,
That seems
however you
low.
want to.
That's really low.
Yes, that's the point. Right. Yes, it seems a little low. It feels like a whiff or maybe a foul ball at best. Push the metaphor as hard as I can. The thing is, the game is inspired by the 1989 movie Field of Dreams, and they play it in the same town where this sort of
Kevin
magical
Costner,
realism.
his
Kevin
dad, all he wanted to do was play
Costner.
catch with him, and he wouldn't do
Yeah.
it. Too self-absorbed. Dad was
Yeah, James Earl Jones, Ray Liotta, blah 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 blah. Shoeless Joe Jackson puts in an appearance. I wish he could put an appearance into the Hall of Fame, but we'll see how that
It
plays
was a
out.
moment of healing along with On Golden Pond between boomers and their parents.
But I'm just going to say, boomers and their parents, and now Field of Dreams, like I mentioned to you before. Let's do an over/under on the Netflix audience and how many of the audience have been born since that movie came out. And I suspect it's 65% who are like, Field of what? So it doesn't have the same nostalgic evocation of, oh, I got to see this just because it reminds me of the movie that I watched as a kid with my dad and it feels special and da da da. None of that happened. And so it's really interesting because Netflix was very, very selective in what they bid for from baseball. Opening day with the Yankees,
Right.
All-Star Game, Home Run Derby, Field of Dreams game. And so lots of grumpy, and this is going to shock you, lots of grumpy New York Yankees fans who saw that coming. Didn't like the fact that the game was on Netflix instead of on, I don't know.
It's $9. Cancel it if you hate it afterwards. Jeez.
Yeah, right, right. But it's New York. If you don't have something to complain about, it's just not a good day.
Maybe I should move.
You'll blend, buddy. You'll blend completely.
That's what I'm told.
Other than the fact that it's hard to find a good Manhattan in Manhattan unless you go to Michael's, because that's a pretty good place to get a Manhattan, as we've discussed in previous editions, actually before this thing. But that being said, so they did a lot of grumpiness about that. Home Run Derby was fine. It was fine. It's the most fun thing in that All-Star weekend because otherwise it's and they're trying to mix up the formats and all that with the Major League Baseball and stuff. And then this thing, it just didn't really hit it out of the park. Does that matter? I mean, Ted and Greg talk a lot about their excellent adventures in baseball. They talk a lot about live events drive an outsized amount of tune in and connection and keeping people around, providing value in ways that just throwing up another
Well, in
show
Japan,
that
the
you
World
just
Baseball
watched.
Classic, which was exclusive to Japan earlier this year, broke records.
That worked.
That was their biggest usage ever in Japan. It's sort of a stagnant market for everyone in SVOD, and it sparked subscriptions and more viewership and engagement they ever had. But it seems like here they're having a little trouble with baseball.
Well, I mean, I think baseball's having trouble with baseball. They did a significant revamp of the game, made it much more interesting and easy to watch for, informal fans, casual fans. But at the same time, the ways that casual fans get to see it have been going away. So the regional sports network collapse that you and I have been talking about for 4 or 5 years now. That has made it so difficult. It used to be it was on the basic tier. You could just be clicking around. Oh, there's a baseball game. I'll turn it on, whatever. I'm going to be cooking or, and have it on in the background. And, you would watch it just because it was there. And now it's much harder. It's more expensive. You got to actually pay for it. So who pays for that as an additional thing? It's a different dynamic in most markets now. And I think that makes it more difficult. I think it's been an essential audio and video, and I don't want to demean the game in this regard, but wallpaper of summer. It is the thing. Vince Scully waxing Shakespearean, talking about Dodger baseball, and things like that. But it's a one of the kind of better tradition thing and connecting with a place and time and having that sort of narrate the summer or your idea of summer. And that's just not what it is anymore. You can't find the game as easily in most markets, and it costs more. The games are at least more fun to watch than they used to be. But I think that's tough, and it'll be interesting to see what that means for, again, the folks that used to carry it a lot, broadcast and cable. So does Netflix pick this up? Is it going to be Amazon and Peacock? I think they both have games. It's hard to keep track even because they'll pop up like Peacock was doing Sunday morning games. Okay, that's fine. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, by the time I just talked to my son, who's watching the Mets, who have been out of it for months, play the Padres, who are trying to gain ground on the Dodgers, and it's just. The Padres are still 8 games back or whatever. It's just hard in the dog days of summer to get interested in that game, no matter how.
And he plays baseball, right? He plays baseball at UC Santa Barbara. Or are you talking about the other son?
No, it's the baseball player. He doesn't anymore.
Right. The baseball player doesn't get that excited about it.
He's
it's like,
in the
this is not a good sign.
I just think the baseball gets interesting in about 2 months, and we'll all watch the playoffs. The World Series was incendiary last year. It's likely to be good again this year, and we'll all say nice things about it again this year. But it feels like, and this has been said for a long time, unless you own the postseason, the rest of those rights, at least in the U.S., you don't know what
they're pretty modest. They're of low value and everywhere, right? So, this is actually a reference to something else I won't get into. But that being said, it is interesting to say, one of the things we have not gotten into is where ESPN will be in 3 years. because there's been lots of conversation for a long time that Disney should spin off ESPN. It is such a outlier from everything else Disney does. And for the longest time, it paid for everything else Disney does. Like it financed the Marvel deal, it financed the Star Wars deal, it financed the Pixar deal. They threw off so much cash in such extraordinary amounts that even though Disney was sharing 20% with Hearst, it was papering over any number of possible sins and Bob Iger expansions and additions, all of which completely defensible and worked out great in lots of ways for a long time. We'll see where Star Wars goes, or if they've kind of run out of stories that people care about that are new. But out of all that, ESPN, where does it go?
Since you segued to Disney, I'm going to keep us on track here with our
But
final.
this is part of the future of stream. This is the future of streaming, and I don't want to lose it because do you think ESPN, which also a year ago, almost to the day, launched its Full Boat app, which is basically everything that's on the cable network is now on ESPN, the app, for $30 a month. Do you think ESPN stays inside of Disney, even though it's an odd fit for something that's increasingly driven A, by the parks, resorts, and cruise ships, and B, by IP that you can endlessly recycle. And you can't really do that with live sports. It's a whole different animal. Do you think it stays over there or it gets sent off?
They have inroads and long-term contracts with the most vital sports leagues.
Absolutely. Great
Why
portfolio.
would any media company divest itself of live sports at this moment? It's the only thing that's really reliable, that drives a mass audience. Sure, you're having trouble in the linear transition. You're trying to go through the garden hose a little bit, but you've already got it set up. Give it a little chance to work. I don't see them spinning ESPN off in the near future.
Do you see ESPN growing? Because yes, they have the best portfolio of sports rights in the industry. And yes, they are paying extraordinary amounts for that. And the return on invested capital is probably not quite as good as you would expect. Though, yes, the NFL is tune in every Sunday, Thursday, Saturday, Monday,
I mean,
it's that.
The rate of largesse under the pay TV ecosystem when it was healthy. I think they were collecting like $10 for every subscriber at one point. I don't know.
Yeah, it's between 9 and 10. It was definitely just a ridiculous amount of money. And that's out of a total cable bill that might be 110. They were getting 9 or 10% of the whole bill for one channel.
Listen, it faces, we are that extraordinarily successful trying to match that success with growth. It's a high bar, and you've got changing consumer tastes. You got millennials who consume sports on social in very short form, highlight driven ways. You've got escalating cost of rights that belie even the best models' margins.
Yeah.
These are factors that affect all distributors of live sports, but if you can get them, you want to do them. I don't see anybody with those kind of inroads giving them up easily.
Well, but that's why we're having this thought exercise. Does it stick around? I mean, the investor analysts are saying, look, it doesn't fit, doesn't make sense. You can't leverage it in the classic Disney style in any way whatsoever. It probably keeps ABC more valuable, no doubt.
Speaking of ABC,
with those rights.
In the future of television, you've got Josh D'Amaro telling Brendan Carr, hey, not for nothing, but go get bent this week. Is
that what he said? Or was that just a legal
euphemism? Just a bit. But
just to be clear, for those who are not, when you say go get bent, that's not a good thing.
No. I kind of feel the need to wrap up here, but they finally pushed back on the FCC, which has been launching investigations, and the chairman has been talking about their patterns of news distortion, all of these fake reports that emerge from their news reporting and their bullying of their affiliates. He's been making these allegations for the better part of 18 months since that regime took office. at the beginning of 2025. And in a lengthy letter to the lawsuit, they outline their case that it's ideologically driven. It's a bullying regime trying to silence the First Amendment.
Right.
And today they said it's affected our programming. My question to you is, why even bother? For one, the FCC and Trump can't take their broadcast license away without Congress, and fair elections permitting, you're about to get control of Congress. Two, do you really need a broadcast network anyway? We've talked to equity analysts who say they could just get out of that business and they'd be better off. Will ABC, the broadcast network, exist in 3 years? Is my question to you.
Well, and this is folded in with ESPN because, again, ESPN's rights for baseball, particularly football, but also the NBA, help float ABC. ABC's not putting out a whole bunch of gotta watch broadcast content other than Abbott Elementary, right? In terms of original programming, there's just not a lot out there. You go, oh, I got to watch that. And it's all on Disney Plus or Hulu. John Landgraf can put out his FX shows direct to Hulu / Disney Plus just as well as put them on FX, a cable channel whose numbers otherwise are shrinking. He does spectacularly great shows. He's one of the greats. He's a Hall of Famer. But, does ABC exist? Does FX exist? Do they need? They don't need that. The affiliates are controlled increasingly by a couple of conservative chains, which is fine. When they shut down Jimmy Kimmel for a week over his apparently impertinent comments about some of Charlie Kirk's less savory aspects of his career after his murder, then they had to fill late night. It was like, oh, this isn't good. Having our news guys vamping for an extra half an hour or 45 minutes just to fill so we could make our money. So it'll be interesting to see if we end up having local TV stations carved off from network affiliations, basically running syndicated content and their stuff and lots of news and sports and their top-down owned centralized news organizations separate from the big Hollywood stuff. And that would be actually the goal for some conservative critics of the liberals in New York and LA.
Since Stephen Colbert left CBS late night in, I guess that was May, have you watched the Byron Allen programmed 11:30 to 12:30 time slot even once this summer?
I have not, but I'm not much of a late night any of those guys. I, like many people, watch the best bits as culled from the night before that the internet has said this was a good one. And I'll kick on that little 3-minute bit or whatever, or that 5-minute interview with somebody. And I don't stay up to watch that. I'm doing lots of other things, but I'm not watching broadcast late night TV for any of them. I just kind of pick up the highlight. And I don't think I'm that different from the kids who, it's like watching baseball highlights. You don't want to watch the whole game. Just give me the home runs and the amazing strikeout, that kind of thing.
So interesting. If we had more time, we could go deeper, but we should probably cut it short so our producer can go sailing. No reason with that.
Yeah, now I'm thinking of crisscross. But anyway, Yacht Rock lives. So we all aboard. This has been Next TMT Talks, our twice-a-week podcast done in conjunction with our beloved partners over at Media Play News on Wednesdays. Sign up for them and for our twice-a-week newsletter, Next TMT, and that is TMT as in technology, media, and telecom, which gives you a little idea about what we like to talk about at nexttmt.com. Sign up, join the party. Thousands have, thousands more will. Join. We are one of the singular experiences in media. Thank you, everybody, for your time, attention, care, and love. This is David Bloom with Daniel Frankel. Over and out.